Unlock the path to healing with Exposed podcast. Join us as therapists from around the world break mental health taboos, share powerful stories, and provide insights that transform lives. Tune in, educate, and thrive.
Number one, grounding. And a grounding technique I teach everybody is you put your hand out like this, you cross it over, you bring it under, and you take a few breaths. So you bring it under like this, like a butterfly. Yep, cross, 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 butterfly, grab it, grab the hands, and then under. And you cross your feet, and you take a few deep breaths. It's like an internal hug. And you can start to feel yourself coming into your body.
Hello and welcome to Expose podcast. Please help me to welcome Riseborough. She is an intuitive life strategist, registered psychotherapist, and transformational healer, featured on Oprah own network's Life Story project. With a holistic approach to healing, Dai integrates spiritual psychotherapy and energy psychology, offering integral breath therapy to help clients achieve deep emotional breakthroughs. Through her compassionate guidance, Dai empowers individuals to face their fears, embrace forgiveness, and reclaim their personal power, unlocking the path to emotional freedom and fulfilling life. That's a little bit. I know there is so much more, and I add the website, but thank you so much, Dai, for joining. I'm here on live, even though we are recording, but live. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Anastasia, for having me on today. I really am looking forward to having a great chat with you about my passion.
I love how you say passion. Passion. It just felt like so good on my body. Could you share with our audience, are we allowed to know more about the moments which shape you to do what you are doing today?
That's a good question. There are so many moments, but what I will say is, it's a journey, right? Like everybody, I wouldn't say there's like one specific moment. I think there's a number of steps that get us to where we are today. And I would say probably the catalyst of who I am or how I stepped into this role. Before I became a well-renowned psychotherapist, I was a chicken specialist. So I worked in agriculture and veterinary health for 17 years. And then I actually then trained to be a therapist. So I would say what brought me to this place was actually doing my own personal trauma work and seeing the power of therapy. I was extremely lucky to have a mentor with my therapist that took me deeper into my work. It wasn't just talk therapy. And we'll talk about one of the modalities that she introduced me to. She was a student of, and now I train people in this. But I would say that was probably the catalyst that brought me to this place, because I was a believer that I can handle my stuff. You know, I moved across the continent to a new country. Look at me go. You know, I've got my shit together. Can I say shit? But I've got my stuff together. So I'm good, you know. But it got to a point where I think I was in a workshop and I just started crying, which was probably one of the very first time in a public setting I allowed people to see me cry, because I keep it together, right? You know, this the rock, you know, there's the pillar of strength. So, and then slowly this little card came across the room, and I actually went into therapy because I didn't believe in therapy. I thought, I can handle the stuff. And I think that therapist at the time had me, after I finished my session, walking out, sitting in my car going, oh, bugger, I'm screwed. Because she got me into two things in 15 minutes. It was like, so she was going to call me on my stuff, which is great, which is the type of person I need that. And I think that in those pivotal moments made that decision to commit to healing myself. And it took 3 years, at least 3 years of intensive work for me to come on the other side. I prioritize my healing as number one, financially, energetically, emotionally, to all that work. And this is where I am today. I actually decided to become a therapist because I know how rewarding it is and how powerful it can be, because I didn't want to stay stuck in that pain any more longer. I've been there for like 12 years, I would say, in that pain, and it wasn't going away. It doesn't go away. It just sits there. So I would say that's probably how I came to this place today.
Well, thank you for sharing how you had, the journey of like having normal job, which gives you just money, and then realizing this is, I want more, and then transitioning to, yeah, I want to be a therapist, and just diving into parts of you which felt like, whoa, where is this coming from, maybe? um and I bet you are so brave for going for it, thinking about that strong, like you could have that life of doing that another job and having life, but then you took that leap of faith. Where that faith came from, I was like thinking about, wow, because you seems like very rational person, and then it shows you have both. You actually, this is the mechanism the culture created for us, to deliver certain things by deadlines, but your soul, whatever you call that energy of who you are, slowly, whispers once in a while. And the pain so many times is the factor why we decide, yeah, this is it. It has been 12 years. I really, the change, like, okay, you decided to change, but we all know that therapy, I mean, those who do therapy knows that it is harder to do the therapy than to sometimes live in the uncomfortable feeling of not change. So doing that work and being where you are, could you say anything to those who are like going through therapy right now and they're feeling, oh, this work is like very uncomfortable, and then feeling like that, what people say, sometimes the victim of, like, why I didn't have the healthy childhood, like, why I was like, what would you say to somebody who might be listening? Because it seems like you're on the other side. It seems like you're on that side of, you went through it. And so if you would like to share anything to, I don't know, to the younger part of yourself, or to just someone who is just listening and might be feeling overwhelmed with the amount of healing, which can come, from many modalities, but it's still, many times it includes our ancestors, I think, even healing those wounds. Or what comes up for you?
Well, you had the point. Healing's not easy. It's not like you snap your fingers and it happens. It's a journey to healing that is the painful situation, because the actual aspect of healing, it just happens. It does just happen like that. But the journey to get there is the painful situation, because what you're doing is you're unlearning. For me personally, in my journey, I call all my clients and anybody I work with, I call them the courageous hearts. I always call my students that have decided to do this work the courageous hearts, and it's extremely rewarding watching them get to the other side and having these breakthroughs, going, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've got here. Because as our human potential is there, but I think the pain, what happens is that we get overwhelmed, and so there's no rush. I think sometimes what happens with people is like, I have to do it, and so I just tell people to slow down. Slow down, look what your capacity is. It is overwhelming, because what's happened is that all of us on some level have never been taught what to do with emotions. And the emotions are well, not the problem, but the emotions are what creates that overwhelm, and why people resist going into the body. Let's just say they want to stay up here in this place because it's easy to rationalize. You just said to me, I seem very rational as I am. I'm a scientist in my mind. I have a very scientific mind, but I've worked really hard to find the balance between the mind and the body. And my experiences have been extremely spiritual, and a number of experiences for me to not for me not to dismiss them. My journey to where I am today has been because I've surrendered to something greater than myself. I don't know what it is. I don't label it. And it's got me where I am today. But when you're working with somebody, is that there's this an innate healer within you. Your body knows what needs to happen. It knows deep inside. The body knows. But what we do is we take the head. The head has kept you safe. And it's doing a great job. It is. It's doing a fantastic job bringing you into a place of survival. You have survived all the bad. I've survived all the bad. I keep reminding my clients, you have survived. But when you say, it's like, why was my life this? When my grandmother was murdered, I also had those thoughts, like, why me? Like, why us? Why our family? And the thing is, terrible things happen to good people. That is the reality of it, is that bad things happen to us. Like, it's not because we did anything wrong. It's just, and I would say, if you can switch it for me, it's like I acknowledge the pain. Believe me, when I was in the moments of all my pain, I couldn't see the gift in my journey. Of course not. But as you work through this, you start to see the gift of the experience that you had. It's still painful. I still mourn the loss of my grandmother. However, it no longer consumes me. And I think that's where people, when you talk about getting overwhelmed in their therapy, that can stay stuck in that cycle of consumption, of being consumed so much in it, and not breaking open enough to just get some space to be able to see something else. So, depending on who you're working with, the type of modalities they're using, there's some that, work more on a somatic, holistic approach versus the heady approach. Because I always have this belief that, well, my belief, but my experience, and I always say this, and I've said it on my website, is that you can't heal a feeling problem with a thinking solution. Your thoughts are important. However, I mean, often I hear people say, oh, I know this about this, I know that about that. And I say, yeah, but your feeling is the problem. You're still stuck in the same cycle. You have a wounding if your physical body, your emotional body, your mind has survived because it's keeping you safe. It's doing a great job, but it's very dysfunctional, distorted. It's not helpful. But when we really want to clear and we really want to move beyond, we need to go into the heart. We need to go into the body. That's where the emotions sit. When I ask people, how are you feeling? I think, and I go, no. Straight away, I wait for them to say, I think. I know straight away where they are. I said, how are you feeling? Put your hand on your heart, take a deep breath. The breath is the bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind, the mind and the body. When you take a deep breath, they go, oh, I'm feeling my chest is tight. I go, okay. And then I take another breath. Oh, I'm feeling some anxiety. There we go. How's the feeling? So I always just say to people, please be gentle on your journey of healing. Take care of yourself. Ask for support. There's no rush. I know there's a part of you that would get frustrated because you feel like you're going around and around and around. And if you are, just ask yourself, is there something here that's creating resistance that prevents me from going further? The more you resist, it will persist. Am I surrendering to my process, or am I fighting my process? Just a question. Be curious. Be curious about your journey. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. And I hope it does for the audience. That's for me. But I like the depth you going in with, sharing your story of losing your grandmother, between that and like, why did it happen to me? And I'm still feeling the grief and the loss and it's unfair. I know it's unfair, but it just allow it to be. Feel that instead of deny it. I think like we as a human, I don't know we, but me, I have this tendency of just being able to accept things they are and just wish they would be different. So
Yeah.
being that, this, go ahead.
No, you're right. That's the thing, is it's the deny aspect of the denial is our resistance to the healing, right? So resistance is a natural form. It's actually a subconscious fear. So resistance shows up in all of us, like procrastination, intellectualizing, rationalizing, lying, denial, avoidance, addiction. We just deny the truth, right? And the truth is the experience we have. Doesn't mean it's the truth. It's a perception of the experience we have, but what needs to happen in those moments to heal, right? For me, with my grandmother's murder, it was a very devastating and shocking for me. And I still think about the day that I got the call. I was in a business meeting in my old career. And I just remember collapsing on the chair and somebody handing me a cup of tea with a lot of sugar in. I do not remember the drive. That's shock, right? You go into shock. The body will go into shock because the mind can't comprehend. And so trauma is like that. We're going to shock. I mean, people are grieving. You're in shock phase in the beginning, right? Shock comes, people, our bodies, we are walking around with a lot of shock in our bodies. And I'll talk to that a little bit later about an integral breath therapy, how we work with that. But we're not like animals. We can't shake it off. An animal is chased by a lion. They get up and they shake it off and they carry on because they don't have a processing unit. What do we have? We have a processing unit. We do not have a mechanism in our body to shake off. We store that trauma as like a hologram within our body, and it sits there in a cellular level. And then it gets layered and layered and layered and layered. So even going through the experience with my grandmother, I think the thing wasn't dealing with her murder. And of course, the fallout of that was, losing my father a couple of years later, having to sit through the trial and relive that again. It was that, I come from a society, well, my country was South Africa. So, I'm living in Canada here, and, the resources that are available to you for mental health, I didn't have anything like that. So there was no therapy. There was nothing. We just like left to your own devices. So, I just got on with my work. I just did my workaholic stuff. I just kept going, but, underneath all of that was this melting pot of emotions. And especially what I'll tell you was anger. So yeah, I had the sadness and the grief there, but I had so much anger, which actually was, well, because I repressed it all the time. I keep pushing down my anger. And then it actually moves into rage. So when we don't deal with our anger, it actually comes out eventually as rage. You see people all in road rage. Road rage is because they suppress anger, and one little slip, people just go, And then underneath that anger is a lot of other emotions. But, for me, I got to a point where I didn't want to carry this rage in my body, and I was afraid of it. Like, I was afraid of my anger in the sense that, I let it out and probably inappropriate moments, like snapping at people, but I would suppress it. But I remember doing my first piece of big work, and we had to release the anger. And I was afraid that if I released it, I wouldn't be able to stop. Number one, I told myself these stories, and that's the thing about fear. We tell ourselves these stories that it's never going to end. I'm going to rage out, and it will be there forever. Or I'm going to rage out. I'm going to hurt somebody. And that is a fear of mine. I'm going to hurt somebody with my rage. So I just kept it in here, right? But anger gets a bad rap. Anger is a healthy emotion. It's just how we deal with it. I teach my clients how to release anger in a healthy way. When I get frustrated, frustration, irritation, annoyance is just anger. I put down to the core emotions. I will go and do a release in a safe environment and healthy environment so it doesn't sit in my body and make me sick. Right? Repressed emotions become disease in your body. Immune issues, any type of disease, autoimmune, there's a lot of trauma that's sitting in our body that becomes a physical ailment, right? Fibromyalgia is repressed stuff, right? So I think, just doing the work, you shift. And, emotions are our friends. They're not our foe. When you talk about fear, emotions are our friends. We just have to learn how to deal with them. And that's where we have support. People show you what to do with those emotions, not to be afraid of them, because they come and go like water. 1 minute you're sad. Think about the times you felt sad. You're sad for 2 or 3 days. You're wallowing in your self-pity, which is always good. I say to people, sit in that place with the sadness. And then one day you wake up and it's like, oh, and you just feel it move. Something shifted. Because that's the thing with emotions. They like water, they move because they are associated with the water element. But what keeps, the actual sensation of an emotion is only 90 seconds in the body, from the brain to the toes, back to the brain. 1.5 minutes, and then it moves. But what keeps it alive is the thinking. The overthinking keeps that emotion moving through the body. And a lot of people are not even aware of their thought patterns, because we have 80 to 90,000 thoughts. Are you tuned into your thoughts in those moments? But you're just feeling that anxiety, you're feeling the anger, but are you actually thinking about what you're thinking? Maybe you're catching 4 sentences, but maybe you've written a whole paragraph. You just might not be aware of, but it's a thought. So when you're disconnected from the body, you wouldn't know what's happening. So just be friends with the emotions.
I just, when you were talking, there's a few things came, but the last one was how the system was designed to keep us in the head, like through the media and kind of like threat when you get, watching the TV. And I'm saying it just to realize the conditioning we all have been through, which the result is we are living from our head. We have more anxiety than the previous generations, at least more reported, right? And then, with the pandemic, the isolation created more even. And then living in isolation without the connection with other humans. But what I really want to say, that's all creates this, disease too, when you mentioned that, how when we suppress those emotions, but it's the opposite. What I try to say is the opposite of being in our body. And if the idea of like, if I keep you busy in your head, then you're never going to focus on what you feel. And if you never, if you never pay attention to what comes up, if you always, push it away and resist it, for you, it was the anger, then you never live your full potential. Because what if that feeling you're resisting the most was your, ultimate place of power, which for us as a woman, we are so damn afraid to express anger because of the conditioning and of like being, the opposite of be nice and kind of little. And then the anger, I'm just watching it right now, how women haven't been allowed to publicly express their anger. Like, it is taken for drama. It is taken for when men, it is like, okay, he just got angry. He has the right for it. He just threw something from the, but then there has been a lot of going on around Freud and kind of like how, I don't want to go too far, but yeah, there are many things which came in the past which made women think that, okay, I don't think if men have the fear so much of like showing the anger. I think like what you mentioned is so real for me and other women. If I show my anger, am I going to be burned on the, on the stocks and like a witch? Am I going to die actually? Is anybody going to marry me if I show my anger? Like, that's another thing, like the conditioning behind what's female energy, because I'm not speaking about women, but just the female energy in this universe of, and then the opposite, if we can truly go to those feelings. But I wanted to ask you, I don't know if something comes up for you, but the forgiveness part, what role does forgiveness play in healing process, and what forgiveness means for you? As
For me.
as it sounds like,
Okay, so that's a lovely question. I love talking about forgiveness because I don't think I'd be here today talking about forgiveness if I hadn't experienced it. So forgiveness is a hard thing because I wrote a little book many, many years ago on it, because when I'll be around through my work, people say, oh, just let it go. Let it go. And I go like, how? And I'm sure everybody can relate, and people say, oh, just let it go. How do I let it go? So what I came to realize for myself, is that forgiveness is not natural. We are hardwired for revenge. We are hard. So, it goes back to biblical times, an eye for an eye, right? Somebody stabs you, you want to stab them back, right? So there's a part of us that just wants revenge. We feel that injustice, right? And I can relate to that because when my grandmother was murdered, I'd had these revenge fantasies. And I always tell my clients, listen, go and have your revenge fantasies. Don't make them real. If they can become real, we have a discussion. But I was always for, having your revenge fantasies because I can't think like this. I'm a bad person if I think that way. There's shame that's attached to that. So part of the process of forgiveness, it's an actual process. I just use the word. Forgiveness is a process. It's not natural. It's a skill we learn over time. So it's like grief. You've got to go through the stages. With forgiveness, the same thing. That's my take on forgiveness. And for me, just even through my own experiencing, your mind can forgive long before your body is ready to. So this is like, you just come back to the body, right? The reason we are struggling in the world today is people are so dissociated and disconnected from themselves. It's hard to connect with other people when you are disconnected within yourself. So when people are living up here all the time and they're not living fully in their whole body, they disconnect. And when we are disconnected from ourselves, we disconnect from the emotions. We don't know what we're feeling. When we don't know what we're feeling, it's very hard to make informed, good decision making because we're so disconnected from ourselves. We're ungrounded. When you disconnect from yourself, we become ungrounded. So when I was doing work around forgiveness, because that was part of my journey, and I was extremely grateful for the work. It was hard work. It wasn't easy. So when I say to people, for my belief about forgiveness, that forgiveness is hard and everybody deals with forgiveness. Thousands of books written on forgiveness, but I just get to little cracks, right? I'm not writing 200 pages of waffle around forgiveness. For me, it is, true, because there's lots of pseudo forgivenesses out there. I've listened to podcasts. I've listened to people's experience about, going out and seeing the person that betrayed them. And then the thought process is like, well, they pity them, like they felt sorry for them. And I'm going, that's ego-based. Right? True forgiveness is a heart place. It's where you have, in my experience, because I felt it, I'll tell you a little bit of the story of it, is for me, true forgiveness is related to both an emotional and a physical response that happens. So when you feel that release happening in your body, because you walk into that room and there's no longer an emotional charge to the person you had issues with. I always say when I'm speaking, I always say, how many of you forgiven somebody? Put your hands up. And they go like me. And I go, okay, keep your hand up. So I say, close your eyes now. You imagine that person and you're walking around the grocery store. You're buying your little things off the stores and you walk around the corner and there's that person. Now notice for yourself, what happens? Did you have a response in your body? Like, did you catch your breath? Did you feel an emotion like you wanted to avoid them? You had some fear, some shame come up. And if you did, keep your hand up. A lot of those hands stay up because there's the emotional charge still. You haven't truly let go because there's still an emotional attachment there. And it's hiding in the body. It's staying in the body, right? So for my experience in forgiveness, and the thing is when I talk about forgiveness, not the same as reconciliation. People get a bit confused about that. Well, I've forgiven that person. Reconciliation, I forgave the man that murdered my grandmother. I don't want to be friends with him. I don't want to hang out with him, right? I've released that charge. And forgiveness is really about myself. It's nothing to do with him, right? But people often think, well, do I have, the reconciliation? Reconciliation takes two people to come together, right? That's what a true reconciliation is. And that's okay if you don't want to do it. And the other thing with forgiveness is like if people say, well, I've forgiven, they keep doing it over and over again. Then my question is, why are you not establishing boundaries? I can forgive you, but going forward, this is the boundary. And and I won't tolerate. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a hiccup there.
So you've been so did you mean you said I forgive that person who murdered my grandmother? You mean you no longer have physically response with that person?
I don't, and so I didn't. After all my work I did, and I'll talk to why I do integral breath therapy, because it was during the session when I was breathing that I wanted to get all this pain out of my body. And I was breathing and breathing and breathing. And in one of the, I can't even remember it isn't important, it's just that my body responded. I got to a point in my breath where I actually literally felt my heart blow open, like feel it in my body, and the healing happened within. And I felt I was forgiving this person. And so the scientist in me decides, I've done all this work. Now I want to go and test this theory, right? So I travel back to South Africa, again, trusting the power that is greater than me, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, that will direct me to wherever this person is in jail. Because I have no idea where this person is in South Africa. I'd left. And so the internet took me to wherever. It took me to the victims charter. I didn't even know we had a victims charter. It put me in touch with somebody who could look up where he was, put me in touch with the warden of the jail, and I made an appointment and I flew back to South Africa. And I drove there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to test this theory. Have I truly forgiven this person? Right? And this is not something everybody's going to be doing. I'm just talking about my own experience, and it's not expected, but this was my experience. So he came in, we sat sort of across the room, and the warden sat to the side to give us privacy. And I asked some questions like why he did it, was it worth it, But to tell you the truth, after 2 hours, I can't remember exactly what I asked him because it wasn't important. And when he came in, there was no anger, there was no sadness, there was no emotional charge. I just wanted to understand his reasoning and how he had been since he had killed her, right? What had happened to him in his life, since how jail was for him. And then I eventually got up and sat right next to him because it was hard to converse across the room. So I sat right next to him. And then I told him he needed to forgive himself. I told him I'd forgive him. And I also mentioned briefly how it impacted my family, how much I'd lost, the impact that basically destroyed our family. My mom, who found her body, never recovered emotionally or psychologically. My father, was his mother, struggled, and, it just impacted his health. I mean, I lost my father at 53. 2 or 3 years later, he died, right? It just, that's the thing about our trauma. It can, it kills, right? It can kill because it has such an impact on our body when we don't deal with it, right? And so I remember telling him to forgive himself, and he was like, no, I can't do that anyway. So it was time for me to leave. And he asked if he could give me something. So they took him off to wherever he is and came back, and he had this card that said, and he had a drawing because they'd taken up some drawing, and he said, thank you for coming to see me. And as I turned to walk away, I'll never forget this moment. As I'm about to speak, I get emotional because it's just, that was grace for me. It's the feeling of grace, and it's hard to explain to somebody. And as I speak, my heart just gets bigger and bigger as I speak right now. But I turned to him and I asked him, can I give you a hug? And he was a little bit hesitant because and he said, okay. So I just took him in my arms. And I can still feel it today. I took him in my arms. I took a few deep breaths and I just held him. And he started to sob. And he sobbed and he sobbed and he sobbed. And I just held him for a while. And I just stood there holding him. And I just whispered to him that he needs to forgive himself. Right? That's all I did. And, I felt like the whole room was just lit up with light, that there was just there was something higher than myself, this connection to something greater in that moment. And, when I walked out of that prison, I had so much joy. Like I had missed my joy with all that had gone through. I just felt my heart was open. I couldn't explain to people, but I felt so much joy in my life again because my grandmother's murder, we used to do certain things and it took it away because you didn't feel the joy in those things anymore, right? But I came back. So this is what happens with forgiveness. And forgiveness actually, and all the work I do is really a foundation of life. Forgiveness is about letting go, forgiving ourselves and being gentle to ourselves for the things that we didn't know before we knew, because often we don't know stuff. And then we beat ourselves up and we reject ourselves. And I say, if I go back to my younger self and said, hey, you did a great job based on the circumstances. Now that you have this awareness, what can you do differently? But forgiveness is really the cornerstone of one of our healings, because where does forgiveness sit? in our heart. And this is really who we truly are. It's the heart. You cannot heal your heart when it's closed. You cannot heal your heart when you're not connected to yourself. You cannot heal your heart when you're going to give me space to open it up for healing. If it's so like tight here, there's no way it's going to go. So I would say forgiveness is, a lot of people do the 12-step program, and, a lot of addicts. I mean, I have a lot of colleagues who work with addiction, and they're like my heroes that take special people to work with addiction. And, the wonder I see of the work they do, because that is true. This 12-step program is about forgiving yourself and making amends, even if you can still forgive when the person has passed on, because there's still that energetic, spiritual, ancestral connection. Because when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations forward, and we heal 7 generations back, because we carry that in our DNA going forward. Look at this. Look at the generational trauma that comes down in families. If you do a genogram, you will see the behaviors. You will see certain things that trickle through, and you can break that cycle. So for me, I think forgiveness is first and foremost about you. It's not about the other person or the situation. And the key thing with the forgiveness, it's a process. I mentioned you have to deal with the emotions. They're still there. If you haven't dealt with all those emotions, you haven't dealt with the anger, you haven't dealt with the sadness, the shame, or the guilt that goes along with this, it's still sitting there. So it's just that, I think, is key to living a fulfilling life, is to let go. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, and thank you for being, so brave and honest, and it just brings so much, to the story. You being open and describing that moment of giving, the last person you probably would ever think you would give a hug.
Right. I was so angry. I had my revenge fantasies of how I torture him, but
Yeah.
the last person I think I'd be giving a hug to.
And then actually, from the perspective, it came to me like what if those experiences, were kind of like a gateway for the soul to grow. Because on the other side, what your story showed was that you were able to feel the joy, which since your grandmother died, you weren't. Somehow, first thing, it should never happen. This is horrible. Nobody took responsibility. The death happened, but the fact that he goes to jail doesn't change anything for you and your family, and your father dying a few years later, as that was his mother. That was his mother, yeah. And for you watching your dad, anyways, I don't want to go too deep, but my point is, you didn't go that path of like, yeah, I'm going to just hate this guy to the rest of my life. You took the opposite path, which we are going to talk in the next chapter of our interview. I think we can have a book here, but the next question, about integral breath therapy, and because it sounded like that was the beginning for you of realizing, this is the journey I'm going to take, and then receiving back that joy was a result of the change, that quantum leap, whatever you call, you took that. How brave it is to fly to, don't know where is, exactly the guy, and then somehow you mentioned guided through some power, universe, whatever people call, but trusting that, even without the need of necessarily naming it, and then being in front of that man, and not having that body response, and the opposite coming with, I'm not sure if you came there with that need of giving him a hug, or actually it came.
No, I didn't come with anything. I remember sitting in a coffee shop, think with a little notebook, like, what questions am I going to ask him? And when I left, the notebook was blank. I didn't have anything. I was just in the moment, and I didn't have any idea of what I would do at all. I think I was just very present for the experience. And, the thing is that when I held him, I felt so much love. So that's the difference. They from hate. So, when we talk about hate, so my teacher of integral breath therapy says hate is love betrayed. Hate is love betrayed. So I removed the hate and I have my love back, right? Hate is love betrayed because he betrayed, right? He took somebody away that I loved, right? And so, but it was true. I actually, I physically felt unconditional love in that moment for that person. In that moment, I mean, I don't think we have, as human beings, have this capacity to be in unconditional love all the time. I think because we are humans, but I think we have these moments of unconditional love when we have these experiences. So in that moment, I had it, and so that opened, my heart was still open, right? And when your heart is open, you can love. But when your heart is closed, often people say, "Well, I don't feel connected to you." I say, "Well, my heart's wide open. Can we check your heart?" And their heart is closed. I said, "Well, now you can see why we're not connecting here, because your heart's not open." So it takes crowbar to open that heart, because people are scared of rejection, or when you talk about not angry people being rejected or not loved, and we all had that programming of of what's wrong with us or whatever. So even that programming dictates how we live our lives, right? All that subconscious programming that we got when we were younger still has a huge impact on how we show up in our world. And that's when, when I work with integral breath therapy, which now is my passion, which is funny because I joke about it. Like, 15 years ago when I did my work, there's no hope in hell I thought I'd be teaching this. It was not on the radar. It was nowhere. And then I happened to go down to, I was invited as a therapist. Well, I was invited to an ayahuasca retreat. I'm not drawn to ayahuasca. I have no issues with it. But I thought, okay, well, I'll test it out because my clients might do it. I need to understand. There's a science in my mind. That balance. I need to have knowledge. And my first night there, we did breath work, and I was like, oh, I forgot this place. So I was breathing away there, and I was like, oh yeah, here we are, this lovely place again. The ayahuascas in the evenings had great, releases, fantastic. But the breath work reminded me again of what's possible, because I can get what I need just with the breath. I don't have to take something, and that's why it's great for addictions. You don't have to take a pill, you don't have to do anything, you just breathe, and the breathe will put you into that altered state. And I remember coming back, and Carol, who's the founder of Integral Breath Therapy, I've always been on a newsletter, had a training. I jumped on the plane, off I go. I go and do the training, and 8 years later, I'm now one of the teachers for this program. It's been really, in my own personal work, I still breathe on a daily basis, not necessarily 30 minutes every day, but when you do the training, we breathe for an hour every day for 30 days consecutively, as long as you can, and even up to 120, maybe 180 days, right? Because you're clearing your system. That's what's happening. You're clearing all. So think about it. You clog, the emotions sit in one tap. You cannot feel the love and the joy without clearing all that gunk that is sitting there. People say, I want to feel love. I want to feel joy. Well, what's stopping the love and the joy coming through? The anger, the unresolved emotions, the belief systems, whatever's sitting in your body, it's one tap. So when we start to clear out that dredge, love and joy and whatever else just flows naturally after that, right? And so we use the breath to do that because it's free. You have it. It's given to you. It's your first thing you take when you come into this world. You go, ah, and what's the last thing you do? When you leave, you inhale as you arrive, and as you die, you exhale. It is such a gift. And the thing about the breath is spirit. So, when you breathe, you connect to something greater than yourself. Of course, we all just breathe, but most people are breathing a very dysfunctional way, a very distorted, because of the trauma they're holding in their body. It's not, it gets stuck. If you think about how you take a breath, it goes, I can't get it all the way up, or it's stuck in your throat or stuck in your chest, right? So coming back, and then now I do the integral breath therapy. which is under the umbrella of breathwork. But I would say that as I would say, we're a little bit different because one of the key things, we breathe in a specific way to connect the subconscious and conscious mind. And what I love about it is when you surrender, like I have been surrendering for 8 years now to the breath. I have no idea where it takes me. I even go, when I did my training, there was no, like, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to do this. No, none of that in my thought process. So I'm just going to surrender to the breath. And next minute, oh, here you are. It's like, oh, and I'm still here. I don't know where I'm going. I keep surrendering to the breath. I'm just breathing. And it will guide me. Every time I need to make a decision, I will breathe on it because clarity will come from it. Right? So you can use that as a great tool to get clear, to release from the body. So if you want me to tell you a little bit about what integral breath therapy is. Sure.
Yes.
Okay. So, most of us, we talk about the childhood, the difficulties, our experiences. We often suppress those emotions physically in our body, right? We tense our muscles and we start to restrict the breath. And over time, that's how we protect ourselves, right? And over time, it becomes chronic. And then it's an automatic. So we start to lose the capacity to experience our emotions. And then we resist our breath. So when we resist our breath, we resist living fully. Okay, so integral breath therapy was a modality which was designed to enhance both the psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being of clients, right? It has it's a great, it can be done. We as a modality train professionals. So we train professionals like mental health professionals, educators. We will train life coaches. We want to take their clients deeper. But we train professionals that are working with something, addiction counselors, whatever. Because what happens is a technique where we use circular breathing to begin with. We always have an intention because the programming that you have, we always work with we work at your house of beliefs. What are your belief systems? So people come, well, I'm not good enough. Well, how does that play out in your life, right? The perfectionist comes up, or whatever. What's happening from the belief that's causing pain for you? So it's a great tool to explore and deprogram or change the programming. So integral breath therapy is we use the breath to go into the body, because I always say talk therapy is great. And I always say that the mind doesn't want you to heal, but the body knows exactly what needs to happen. So when we breathe, we connect the mind, the subconscious and the conscious. And then we breathe for a specific period of time, doing circular breathing, and then we do conscious connected breathing for an hour. So what's great about that is that with a facilitator, we sit with you because we also believe there's an innate healer within you. The body knows exactly what needs to happen. My job is to guide, well, not necessarily guide the system. I don't take, and now you're going to go down here, and now you're going to do that. No, you're going to do your breath with the intention to release my fear that I'm not good enough. And you're going to breathe into that. I don't know where it's going to take you. I will check in with you. We'll see what happens. Sometimes the emotions come up. There's an experience when you were 5 years old and your dad is saying, well, that's great. You got 80% on your report card. What happened to the last 20%? So you might not remember that because often people go, oh, I don't know. Where did that come from? Because the memory, because people say, I don't remember my childhood. I go, it's not important. You remember the feeling. Because what we have in our bodies is something called a codex of trauma. So the best way I explain it to people is you have an experience. Let's just say you come home, you're trying to get your mom's attention, and she says, like, go away, I'm busy. She's on the phone. And I see it often today with cell phones. I see the kid pulling on the feet, and the parents are like on the phone like this. And I can see straight away that the belief is forming in a subconscious way, because only when you're around about 8 years old does the brain come on going, oh, I'm not lovable enough. You're not thinking that at 2 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. You're just having an experience. But the feeling that's attached to that of feeling rejected, I'm not loved, whatever. But the belief is forming, and that's where the codex starts. So it's like a stack of pancakes on a plate. So you have your first experience of being rejected. Let's say I'm not enough, let's just say. There goes the plate. And then the feeling that's attached to it would be sadness or fear or whatever, right? But you're not consciously going, oh, I'm afraid, I'm sad. You're just having the experience at that age. And then every time you have an experience which is similar, a pancake, another pancake. So you have a stack of pancakes, which is called like a cohesive trauma. That's when we do breath work, we take the pancakes off. That's what we're starting to do, is we're going beyond the conscious mind who's trying to protect you, right? Oh, no, we can't go there. We have to rationalize. I know I'm enough. Look how successful I am. But there's still an emotional attachment to not feeling that way. So when we're breathing, it goes into that traumatic space. And the experience, I say to people, what's the experience you're having? And what makes us a little bit different in our work, there's lots of breathwork modalities out there. But what I would say, so I don't call ourselves breathwork, we are called integral breath therapy, mainly because everything's coming to the surface. A lot of the modalities, the things come to the surface, and then you deal with it alone. Like, people will do a certain breathe and they feel great, and they go home and they might crash, right? It's like, well, that's not processing. But with IBT, the huge component or the key component we have when we are working with a client is something called a corrective action experience. I don't let a client walk out. They might be processing afterwards, but when they're in that altered state, so I want you to think about something. The subconscious mind doesn't know what's real and what's not real. So, for example, let's say you have that experience where your mom is rejecting you and you're feeling not loved. I'll ask that 4-year-old or 5-year-old, what do you need right now? Because I'm talking to the 5-year-old. I'm not talking to the 30-year-old woman lying in front of me. I'm talking to the 5-year-old. And the 5-year-old says, I need to be acknowledged, or I need to be seen. I need attention, or I need comfort. So I'll gently hold her hand, or whatever it's the unmet need that needs to be resolved and release that trauma, that pancake, right? Because in the subconscious place, the mind goes, oh, I'm loved. The 5-year-old's like, I'm loved, right? And so that's the big thing. The key takeaway of our training is that it's a corrective action during the integration process. It goes to the root. It goes to the root of those core beliefs. It transforms them at a cellular level. And it's those core beliefs that create that programming that still run your life and the way you see the world, how the lens you look through, right? So going to the root of this work is crucial to creating a future that's different from what the past was. So it brings about sustainable change. I mean, I've been breathing for a lot. So my pancakes have come off. I mean, not so they're all gone, but they're still coming off, right? I think, oh my God, I've done this like 10 years ago. Why is it coming back, right? Another piece of pancake on a much deeper level is now coming through, because a lot of this, for all of us, including myself, is still unconscious. And it will come through in the breath sometimes. I even had my experience. I was in my leadership and we did a breathe. And at the end, our founders said to us, how many of you were surprised where it took you, where you thought you weren't going to go? And all of us, I put up my hand up, I was like, I had no idea it was going to go here. Because that's what happens when you allow and you surrender to the breath. The body will know what needs to happen. The body will create that sustainable change. And that's what our program does, is we create sustainable change with that integrated process of a corrective action. Because there's no point saying, okay, that's great breathe, how you feel, oh, calm. But what did you come in with? Did you feel there's a correction happening? No, right? So we do it in the subconscious mind. So when we finish our work, we always work with an affirmation. So if your belief is, I'm not good enough, let's say during that experience, whoever you had that experience, and you might have more than one cycle, because sometimes you go here, you bounce over there, and you bounce back, you're taking 5 pancakes off, or it could just be one cycle, depending on what's happening, because the body knows it will never give you more than you can handle. So, you'll take it off, and then we connect the dots. And then I say, well, I want you to come up with an affirmation based on this experience. So it will say, I am enough just the way I am. And so then my homework would be to imprint that new plate, and not a coat of trauma, but a new plate of a belief system we need to build it stronger. And you don't do it in the conscious mind by going, oh, I'm enough just the way I am. I'm enough just the way I am, because it's up here. We want to go into the body. So you go back into the trance-like state in the subconscious mind of anchoring that in and making it stronger, right? So that's why the altered state is really important. You know, a lot of people will do cyberpsilin. They will do MDMA. You know, there's a big push for that kind of stuff as well. So I often use it. Integral breath therapy is Mother Nature's way of microdosing, because it is. You know, sometimes people are just looking for the next fix, right? And it can be. A lot of people do breath work to get high on, right? But you know, and a lot of people don't want to do it. So it's great for addictions, PTSD, any trauma-related issues, anybody wanting to having issues with relationships, you know, because again, if you actually look what's happening, it's always related to your programming. Your subconscious programming will come forward. Even when I'm working with somebody, a subconscious belief suddenly comes out of that breathe. They go, where did that come from? I didn't even know I believed that, because that's how unconscious stuff is, but the impact it has, right? So you can still get to the altered state if you do the breath work, because it's just like the ayahuasca, the cyberpsilin, the MDA. What it does by breathing, it triggers the DMT we have in our body. We all have DMT. So basically, we plants. DMT is a plant-based thing, right? So basically, we are plants, but it triggers just like the stuff you're drinking. It will trigger DMT, which will create that altered state. It bypasses the psyche, so you can get to the root of it, because the psyche, again, is trying to keep you safe, but you want it out the way, right? Because it's not really helping you, not really healing you. So that's the power of IBT. And we use different sort of modalities as a facilitator. I will use different things based on the client coming in. My role is to hold the space and support you. As the breather, it's your job to have a breathe, and you get what you put in, right?
What else can well, thank you for sharing all of that. DMT, that's the deep mental state, or what? What DMT stands for?
Okay, so DMT, you'll have to Google it because it's this long. There's an actual name. It's in our body. It's like a sort of thing that we release into our body to give us that psychedelic kind of response, right? Puts us into, it's also, you know, puts us into that altered state. We actually go into altered states, which are like a trance-like state, between 50 to 100 times in an hour, but that's more of a dissociated state. We do it all the time. People are dissociating all the time. They're not grounded. And that's the issue we're having with society, extremely dissociated and ungrounded. And so one thing that my students have said to me, you know, in their training, it's like, oh my God, I'm so much more in my body. So that means you're more grounded. You're not associating as much. You're not leaving your body as much, because we do it to protect ourselves. We're going into the zone. Dissociation is like zoning out, right? That's dissociation. I always say to people, notice when you're dissociating. Somebody's talking to you and you've got that glazed look, right?
Yeah, I had that a lot, many times. But now, as I'm, you know, more talking, doing my own healing, and then realizing
Good.
it's not just me. We are actually, it's one thing is the trauma, but also there is so much stimulus around, bombarding, you know, the TV. So it's like fighting for our attention. So it's both. Yeah.
That's true.
But then, tell me more a little about what else can integral breath therapy, and you know, we all heard breath therapy, but there's integral. Where the integral comes from? What does it mean, and what's different from the breath therapy? And
Okay, so there's lots of, as I mentioned, there's lots of breath works out there, right? But I found that, I mean, I've even experienced certain ones, but I don't find that they have a integrated process in the actual breathing themselves. The corrective action is missing. And for Carol, she's been doing this for 35 years. I mean, she was probably one of the very first people that did circular breathing. Now circular breathing's all out there, which is great. Everybody should be breathing, but integral, because we use an integration process while they're breathing. So it's integrating on a spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental level. It works on all the levels at the same time, because we are a multidimensional being.
Okay, so I guess that's something somebody has to experience, and is more than really explained right now on the show. Can you share a little more some of another cases of Caroline or your um, clients who what they came with, like another, I don't know, chronic disease or anything would surprise you, what the integral breath therapy helped them? Um,
That's a good question. I see it every time, my clients, let me see. I've had clients come in and been able to heal their relationship with their parent, after doing the work, right? The forgiveness part of it is a part of integral breath therapy as well, where I have exercise that will come to that. I've seen clients that have released physical issues in their body. So it's actually interesting. One of my students, when we did our first training in May, and I can speak to this because she shares it, is after 6 days of training, she has a lot of skeletal problems, sclerosis, and a whole lot of restrictions in her body. And when we had finished the training, so they'd only breathe for 6 days, she went to her chiropractor. The chiropractor said, what are you doing? Your body's changed. So after 6 days, her body physically changed because of the breath. And then she went to her osteopath, and her osteopath says, what are you doing? Your lung capacity has grown. So physically, I've seen changes in the physical body, including myself. I have worked and have pain in my body because pain has a message for me, right? Pain says, hello, attention, hello. And what do we do? Advil, ignore it. So I will breathe into the pain, bring my focus to the pain. Tell me more. Tell me your story. What emotion is sitting there? I see some anger sitting here. What's the anger about? Breathe into the anger. So, that's the pain is a message for us. We just ignore it. So physically, I have removed issues in my body. My body is much more, because of the holding, right? We all hold. My body is so much more flexible than what it used to do. So from a physical perspective, a lot of people have had spiritual experiences where they felt very connected to the divine, whatever that is for them, and they've healed their anger towards God or whatever that would be. I've had some people, obviously in the trauma base, the emotion, healing their actual trauma, and able to release it from their body, like their PTSD. And there's severe trauma. I've dealt with a lot of, early trauma, like 3 months old, 6 months old babies, and been able to release that from the body to find some peace, right? And because that's the thing, we work as a modality, we work with a shock and trauma model. So we also use Peter Levine's work, because a lot of people don't realize that they're actually dealing with shock and not necessarily trauma, because shock is much more powerful than trauma, because shock has no resources, where trauma has a resource. You survived. So often shock can come up in a breath, and people that are not trained well don't even know that that person's in shock again. Even the person doesn't know they're in shock, right? So I teach the shock trauma model, and it happens. Shock can happen a lot in groups, and people don't even know they're being re-shocked, because I don't know what it is. I can feel shock. I mean, I have experiences where I walked into a room and I can feel the shock coming out the room, because it's contagious. One person goes into shock, the whole room will go into shock, including the facilitator, unless they're captured, right? So shock is contagious. So we are very mindful of teaching that aspect. It tends to happen a lot more in groups than necessarily in one-on-ones, but I've dealt with one-on-ones where 50 minutes into breathe, their shock is starting. So we titrate. So think about shock. You don't let them go into shock. It's a Coke bottle. You shake a Coke bottle. You take the lid off like this and it'll explode. No, you go, shh, shh, shh. That's how you work with the shock. You titrate it up and down so that it releases from the body, because shock is looking to be released. You don't want to keep it in the body. So there's a difference between the shock and the trauma when we're working with people, right? And so that's it. I mean, I think that's what makes our program very different, is the corrective action and the certain things that we work with, not just to breathe of people feeling great, because that's great. Some people just want to breathe over here, and that's why we train our facilitators. When people train with us, they no, they don't have like a 6-day breathe and often go work with people. Oh, no. They've got to go through a certification process, which means they're going to do their own personal work, because you can't take your clients where you haven't gone yourself. So it's extremely important that we make sure our facilitators will do their own personal work and are supervised regarding that. So it's just not like doing a weekend course on your breathwork. Oh no. That's just how the way we see it. Our pillars of our work are integrity, skill, and love. That's what we work with: integrity, skill, and love for integral breath therapy.
So what you just touched upon the shock, you mentioned at the beginning you would like to talk more, so you just answer it, right? That we can deal with shock with by little opening and through the breath work and there is one thing which came up, like how can you, for somebody who's listening, can they do the breathwork journey on their own, just watch some videos, like on YouTube there are this Wolf, that guy from Holland or somewhere, I forgot his name, the tall guy.
Oh, you mean William Hoff? With William Hoff?
Right.
Yeah, that's a cold. So yeah, that's so everybody has their own way of doing breathwork and what works for them.
Yeah.
I
wanted to
for me, sorry.
I wanted to just ask what's the risk, what to look at to know that it's not. Is there some certain steps or something?
Not a TikTok weekend thing, right? Well, so often when you are looking at, I know there's a lot of people. I don't do online breath work, integral breath therapy, because I'm a believer it's like massage. Okay, how do you do massage without a body? So, and there's different, and you can do breathing. That's not a problem. You can do breathing, do the circular breathing, and that is fine. But the type of work I'm doing is going much deeper into the work of doing it a nice, there's lots of breathing where you feel great afterwards and you feel a release, which is fine. But I would say, check out the different modalities out there. The people that are running them, ask questions. Ask the questions that what make you feel safe enough to go and do the experience with that person. It works, like for me, doing William Hoff's work, jumping into a cold basket of whatever. No, that would not work for me, because it probably would put me back into shock. Like I know my body, I've learned my body, and I'll probably hold like this. I know we release the breath, but I watch the breathing. I know I probably would just hold my breath. And so I'm not wanting to hold my breath. And that's great. You get a great rush. I mean, I wake up and I splash cold water on my face or take a 1-minute cold shower. Great. It wakes you up. And get that dopamine rush, which is fantastic. So, but I don't want to be doing 30 days of jumping into a cold ice bucket. But that's for other people. That's okay. And there's different types of breathing. Everybody has their own way of working with it. But I think if you want to ask questions of what you need.
And then as we are slowly landing, and you shared so much, and we'll add the website for people to join the next workshops in person. I really like what you said. You have to experience it in person. It's like a massage. You cannot, bring the virtual body there. But then I bet so I want to highlight that. And neuropsychology of breath, like what can we share? I know there is so much, but I would like to encourage people here with, even doing the breath work for, before going to sleep for a few minutes, whatever comes, start with something somewhere. So what would you like to talk about the benefits of breath work, the neuropsychology, what happens in the brain? And there is, some work of Joe Dispenza. I know people are like watching those
Yes.
videos. They appear so much about the pineal gland, and well, but it's like people using those words, they don't know what it means. We keep repeating it. So what it truly is.
Well, there's like, there's so many benefits of breathing, right? Whether you want to call it breath work, integral breath therapy, but this breathing, right? There's physical benefits, you'll feel better. We know that if we breathe for 20 minutes a day and you make it as a practice, you can actually reduce anxiety and depression by 82%. There's studies that show that 82%. If you have it in a practice and you can reduce anxiety and depression by 82%. So there's lots of benefits to this. It helps with relationships. It will remove limiting beliefs physically in your body. One thing about it was actually interesting. So when I was on my meeting, we went and peed on our little pee sticks before we breathe, and then we pee afterwards, your urine. Because what actually happens is if we breathe on a continuous basis, your body can shift from acid to alkaline. So think about acidic bodies are inflammation, right? So the more you breathe, it can reduce inflammation. What is inflammation? Inflammation is repressed energy, right? Holding. What's sitting in that inflammation, right? So one of the benefits of breathing is shifting from acidic to an alkaline. And also they show that people that breathe on a continuous basis have about 60% more oxygen on a cellular level. So think about the little cells. What doesn't survive in oxygen? Viruses, bacteria. Nothing can live in oxygen, right? It's oxygen, right? So immune system improved. I mean, I beat COVID. I mean, traveled over when I had to. Like I was to breathe with people, whatever we had to do. I still beat the COVID, right? Breathing. Improves the immune system, right? So that's, immune system can improve. It can improve your connection to a spiritual connection. It opens up your heart to something greater than yourself. You can heal that relationship. So we talk about the brains. That's really interesting. So our weekend, one of my students just recently certified, and she works with the brain. She works with brain waves. So we actually got to breathe and test our brain waves as we were breathing. So we are doing some work around our IBT, the impact of IBT on brain waves, because it is showing that that when you breathe, it has an impact on that, definitely. There's more research coming out over time, right? We just taking time to do that.
Are we okay?
Okay, even beating cancer. I don't know. I'm not going to claim that breathing will beat cancer because that's a big claim. But what I will say is that if you are, cancer doesn't survive in an alkaline state. And necessarily, I mean, cancer was a virus, right? So I'm not saying that that IBT or breathwork will cure that, but what I will say is that it will help with the immune system. So if your immune system is compromised, it will help to support that, definitely. So there's so many benefits. I always say everybody should be breathing, even if it's 10 minutes a day. I say to people, you drive in your car and you just take a few deep breaths. Just notice how and connect to your body. And, people have these Apple Watches. I think Apple was sneaking on me a couple of years back. I said, oh, damn, I wish they'd have like an app that remind them to breathe. And guess what? 5 years later, there's an app now that says breathe. It sends you a little zip on your Apple Watch. And then I say to my clients, did it tell you to breathe? They said, I just swiped it away. I said, no, breathe. Because I was using a rubber band, a snap, to remind yourself to breathe. So you could breathe on the hour for 2 minutes. Your day would be so much better because when you breathe and you can reduce your anxiety, you can get out of this stuff. The two things I teach people is number one, grounding. And a grounding technique I teach everybody is you put your hand out like this, you cross it over, you bring it under, and you take a few breaths. So you bring it under like this, like a butterfly. Yep, cross, butterfly, grab it, grab the hands, and then under. And you cross your feet. And you take a few deep breaths. It's like an internal hug. and you can start to feel yourself coming into your body. You're not spinning. So, you know, fear, as much as shock, is contagious. So when you're in a position where other people are in fear, guess what? You'll get triggered into your fear too if you're not grounded. So if you stay grounded like the tornado, think about the tornado. It's spinning around there, and in the center of that tornado, it's quiet, so quiet. You can be the center while everybody else is spinning, and you can just watch them spin, and you can stay grounded. So grounding and breathing will calm that nervous system down. That is key to help you support you through any potential crisis that you're going through and the overwhelm you're feeling. Will ground and breathe. It will shift for you so you can think a bit clearer.
And you actually responded to my second question, which was like any exercises you wanted to share. So thank you for that. What else comes up? I didn't ask you. Would you like to add? I mean, I just want to be respectful toward your generosity, your time, and being aware where we are at.
No, I think we're good. I mean, I don't know. Is anything more that you need from me?
I mean, there was, I sent you those questions. There was one more, but I'm not sure. There was one we didn't talk about.
Which was what?
Facing fear.
Facing fear.
And then the second one was how, after overcoming your personal loss and helping so many people navigate their emotional challenges, what was the most rewarding? What was the most rewarding part in your, of
I think I covered that one by saying, watching my courageous hearts, watching them get it. They get it. That is the most rewarding. When somebody comes to me and smiles, and, oh my God, this happened. I go, my heart just goes, woohoo, because, that is why I do this. People say to me, oh, you're so great. And I go, my ego says thank you, but my soul just smiles because that's not important.
Yeah. And I wish we could make a selfie of that, the soul sometimes selfie, inside. Maybe we can invent those before the next become billionaires to invent a phone which can make a picture inside.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I've covered that one. But I think, do you think you got enough? Do you think you have? Do you think I fulfilled?
Yeah, I just like to leave it to you if there's anything comes up, which I don't think you mentioned already. There is nothing which you feel on your part. I don't have any more questions on my part, so.
Yeah, I don't have any question. I think I hope that I was able to give your audience what they need, from different things. I mean, I didn't discuss the intuitive aspect necessarily, which is fine. But I mean, that's how I live my life. I mean, from coming to the country, and it's about surrender, just getting on a plane and not having a job, didn't know anybody, didn't have anywhere to live, just 2 suitcases, trusting that the universe is taking care of me because I was told I had to do this. I'm like, okay, I'm here, right? So look after me, right? So I didn't talk about that, but that's okay. I think.
But you right now mention it. So that had to be the opposite of like you actually tuning into your body, listening what your body said, and not listening to the mind of I don't know anybody, I don't have the money, I don't have all those limiting beliefs. Like naturally it feels like your heritage of being from South Africa, somewhere that heritage. And I feel like it is a little bit about the culture too, like that ability to dive into intuitive. I feel like in African culture especially, people are more connected with the nature and respecting the nature.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but I just know that from my experience, I've always had this connection to something greater than myself since I was like 2. So for me, I feel pretty old. I've been around this planet for a long time. I'm so bored. And people say, have you read this book? Yeah, like 30 years ago.
Right.
But that's not true. But it's just that, I think part of it is staying connected to yourself, exploring that aspect and listening to yourself. You can't listen to yourself when you're disconnected. So when you talk about intuition, people ask me this question all the time. How do I know it's my intuition? And this is what my answer to them is. If there's no fear. Because intuition doesn't have fear. If you have anxiety, it's not your intuition, people. So if you're driving down the road and somebody says to you, turn left, listen to it. But if your anxiety says turn left, it's not necessarily your intuition, right? It's your fear, right? So fear or love, that's really what we have in our world, fear or love. So if you're not making a conscious choice from a place of love, which very few people are doing that, we don't walk around with a latte saying, I'm drinking this because I love myself. We don't think like that. A lot of your life is driven from a subconscious fear, which we're not even subconscious, right? Unconscious notion. So the intuition for me is it's like going to the gym and building that muscle. Like I've built my muscle up since I was a kid, and I didn't let people tell me that there was something wrong with me. Oh, they'd often say, my friends would joke, oh, that's just Di. And I go, yeah, that's just me. That's just me. I'm a little unicorn over here before unicorns became popular, right? But I had my whatever my connection to spirit would look like, whatever that would be, and my experiences that I've had with that. Believe me, if I sat in a therapist's office and talked about stuff, they'd probably put me in a white room. But luckily enough, I had a therapist that understood the spiritual realm of therapy, right? Because there is such a huge connection to our spiritual aspect that we disconnect from. And often people think it's a religious thing. I say, no, spirit is know thyself. Know thyself. Come back to you. Stop abandoning yourself. That connection you're looking for starts with you. And then you can go out and connect with others. Spirit, whatever. When people say, I say, stop spiritual bypassing. Come back to the grounded spirituality of what life is, right? Be grounded in your spirituality. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, underlined human. You're not having a spiritual experience. You're having a human experience which will help you grow in your spiritual life, whatever that looks like for you, whatever contract you have, whatever soul growth is meant to happen for you. That is what happens. You reside within spirit. Your body is encased within a huge spirit. Your spirit isn't necessarily inside you. You are inside spirit, right? And so, but that's a big thing, is that people, when we talk about the soul, one thing I am certain of, based on my experiences, every time I do a deep process of work, of release, of any type of trauma, my intuition goes off the scale. Because we're clearing. So think about it. You're clearing yourself out of all the dredged stuff, and you're getting closer to your natural spirit, right? Your actual, who you truly are, right? Your authentic self, right? And you're cleaning out all those limiting beliefs, all that trauma. I will say, every time I've done that, my intuition, I will pick up people in Australia. And I'll be eating my dinner and I'll start crying. It's like, well, why am I crying? And my friend's face will pop in suddenly. And it's like, oh, then I'll text, how are you okay? No, my mom just died. Oh, I'm feeling the grief, right? So, for people that are wanting to explore their intuition and grow, you need to do your work. You need to go deeper into your work and release all that.
And it's like, how can you use those gifts, like you knowing what's happening, and not knowing, but there is some kind of knowing which it's like, it's not telepathy, but it is kind of sometimes like you later discover it's really like when you get that, information that somebody is really struggling and you had just feeling about them. And it happens so many times. And I know, how can we actually use that as like, it's not to monetize it. I'm not talking about being a witch and now I'm going to tell you the, things, but more, is it just for us to serve us? Like, is there like, did you get any like idea on using it in, like, are we using it enough when we have, because not everybody has it. And when you have it, you're like,
actually everybody does have it. However, what happens is that we are born with it. So our first language is telepathy. How do you think a mother and a baby communicates? Through the body. Telepathy. There's no No, the first language we have is telepathy, because we aren't born with a language. We are given the language from our parents. And then you watch babies, they mimic backwards, right? There's no language. They don't walk out, they don't come out the womb going, oh, hello, my name is so-and-so. Here I am. There's no language. So our first language is telepathy. That's that energetic connection, right? So we're all born naturally with it. But what happens? You think about children that talk about their imaginary friends, or there's somebody staying in their room. Don't dismiss it, because they're wide open. Their hearts are open, their souls are open, their chakras are open. They are open. They haven't yet gone into that holding shield pattern, because unless they've traumatized, right? But generally at that space, they haven't started that. So if I work with children, they clear quicker than adults will, because they haven't had so much holding, right? They haven't had 40 years of holding. They've only had 10 years maybe, and it's not as deep, right? But we all have it. And so the key here is that when people are dismissive of how we are as children, right? We start to shut it down. So we all have these sensories, there's those different senses. For me, it is more of, it can be clairsentient, which I feel it in my body, just a deep knowing. It can be something auditory. For some people, hear a voice, right? I know when something higher that works with me wants my attention, it uses my full name. I hear my name. Oh, my name. Okay, somebody's talking, right? And then I listen. So we can all work on improving our intuition, because we naturally have it. So it's like going to the gym. You work on skills, right? And think about this. So one of the ways I actually help my clients, if they want to build that intuition, because intuition is connected to yourself again. So a lot of people go and buy cards, those soul card, the cards that you pull and you get a message on, angel cards, or there's a whole lot of different type of cards out there. Some people have tarot cards, whatever type of cards they have, right? Let's just say. There's one set of cards I always recommend to my clients use, because there's no book. There is no book. It's just a card. There's a set of cards, and it's for you to go within when you get the card. And that is how you will get stronger with your intuition, because what are you seeing within this card that is coming from your deep depths of who you are? There's no book to give you the message. And even when I say to people, if you pull a card, look at the card first, see what you get from that card, then read the message and see if they correlate to what you are getting from the card. Trust yourself. Intuition is about trusting yourself. That's what it is, right? How we can build on it. And there's nothing, people have workshops out there that help you with how to build that for yourself. There's lots of stuff on the internet, but really it comes down to connecting with yourself. First and foremost, it'll be hard for you to be in your intuition if you're disconnected.
It made me feel like your journey, my journey is similar, because I came here in 2019 July 17th, and it was just, I had this feeling for the 2 previous years to come here to LA, but I was in bad relationship, and just many things stopping me. But when I left that, then that was that feeling coming up, like that intuition come here, and it was like, come on, I don't know anybody, first of all. But then I was saving money from the very beginning, when I had this feeling for 2 years. And it was funny, because it was my intuition knowing I will need that money. But anyways, so when I things got safer for me to leave, I follow, like you mentioned, like had a luggage, didn't really had even though you are more rational than my brain is not like so low. Like I feel like we still have visible parts of just there, but our journey, and I hope that many people also will follow their intuition, even if it doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't have to make sense. It's just like, there's this deep knowing. And a part of it is that, you use your tools and trusting yourself. And, like I say, if there's no fear, it's your intuition, right? When I came to this country, believe me, not like that, I wasn't like fearless. People say, well, where are you going? I was like, I don't know. Oh, do you know anybody? No. And guess what? The universe provided me with somebody. Somebody picked me up from the airport. I stayed with them. They took care of me. It's just, I surrendered to something greater than myself and said, okay, you want me to go? Sort it out, right? right? To sort it out, because I know it would work out. I mean, it was foretold, it's going to work. The voice said, off you go. I was like, okay, all right. But part of this is surrendering to something, having faith and trusting yourself that it will work out. You know, I know sometimes, so there was, I mean, I did have brown paper bags I was breathing into, like at times it was like, ooh, you know, but deep, deep down, I know that I'd be looked after. So having faith in something, trusting your intuition, knowing it in yourself, following strategies. You know, there are things that I have control over. I mean, so what's the worst can happen? Okay, I could get a hotel. What's the worst thing can happen, right? So yeah, there's the rational mind thinking about things, right? I had a plane ticket, I had my suitcases. If something didn't work out, I'd find a way, right? We all survivors. You think about it, we all survive something. As human spirit, we'll find a way to survive. In our deepest trauma, we have still survived, right? But you know, trusting your intuition is something that is important, because think about all the mothers. They know when there's something wrong with their kids. Like, pick up the phone. Hey, are you okay? Because that's that first language, the telepathy between mother and baby, right? It's already there. We just need to build it and trust it.
So, wow. So I like what you mentioned, that you still, you had this intuition, but you had still that fear, because that makes all of our audience realize that, yeah, it's going to be there, the worry, because we are humans and conditioned to fear, to protect. But then somebody appeared on that airport. Did I understand correctly that
Yeah.
and that was just something totally like a, not surprise, but miracle, because, you just had that feeling of like just be there on the airport and somebody just appeared.
Well, there was so 2 weeks before, I still didn't know where I was staying. And then one of my colleagues at work had actually emailed somebody in Canada and asked if they would take care of me. I didn't know they did that. So I had no idea. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, we've got a place for you to stay. It's like, okay, thank you.
Taking care.
So you see, when you try, I mean, I don't know where it was coming from.
Yeah.
I surrendered to the something greater than myself. Say, okay, you sort it out, right? I'm going to be, in your hands. So let's just figure it out. So I'll just wait, right? Because I had 2 weeks, right, to still get a place if I needed a place, but I didn't.
Yeah,
It worked out.
Yeah, it did.
And that's the thing with intuition. We never really, and that's the thing about surrendering, not intuition, surrendering. You never know where it's going to go. And that's what surrender is surrender.
It makes me want to Google the word in Latin, surrender. What does it mean? But I will do it probably after the show. But
Okay.
but
surrender to the process. Surrender to life. So I said to you in the beginning, when we resist our breath, right? When we don't breathe, we resist life. So the opposite of surrender is resistance. So when we don't breathe, we resist life. So when we breathe, we start to surrender to that breath. We surrender to life, right?
Right.
We open ourselves up to something greater, whatever that would be.
And then on the opposite, if we don't surrender, then we freeze, and the freeze is the lack of breath, and that's
Correct.
when trauma happens. And
yeah, and one of the distorted breathing patterns is freeze, where they're frozen breather. They're like this,
shallow.
Frozen breather. Yeah, the whole body is frozen when they breathe. They're like this, and they're always cold.
Yeah.
So a frozen breather will be cold. So I remember one of my students was a frozen breather, and it was so lovely. At the end of the training, it's like, oh, I feel so warm. It's like, yay!
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was yeah. It was so much I would talk with you, but I'm just grateful. I hope that the last thing about intuition help our audience to realize that sometimes we might be just not living the life the universe has for us because of that fear, that living the head. And just by going to the breath, we might develop more faith.
Yeah.
To see how the body can make us feel safe, and the breath can connect with that whatever skill it feels like is a skill to develop Dai, I just wanted at the end, I was holding this question, not question, but to tell you, Dai, your name in Polish means give.
Means what?
Give. To give.
Oh, to give.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. Huh. I didn't know that. To give. Well, that would make sense. I give a lot. Yes.
And there has to be a balance to receive. So thank you, Dai, for being a guest. That was a pleasure. Everyone listening, please. Actually, I will bring the gallery. How people can find you, Dai? I'm going to attach all the websites, but is there certain workshops or something coming up?
Well, they can actually just go to my website, which is riseborough.com. And on the website, I have the different services I offer. Right now, I've finished the trainings for integral breath therapy, the profession I've trained this year. I haven't planned any for early next year. I'm looking more towards the end of next year in Canada. But they can always reach out to me with email through my website or riseborough.com and ask for information, where they come from, if they're looking for anything. And if they need referrals in their area, for integral breath therapy, if they're interested in working with somebody, I can always look out and see what area they're in, if there's anybody in that area, and refer them to them. Yes, I train therapists, I train mental health professionals, educators, life coaches that are certified, and sometimes like RMTs, any body workers, that work with the body. Somatic work, they do somatic work because our work is a lot, does encourage a lot of somatic work as well. So mental health professionals, addiction counselors, that is such a great piece of work, because a lot of my professionals work with first responders and PTSD. So it's great for addictions. It will help them get past that in addiction centers. So anything like that as well. So anybody that is interested, we train professionals in the mental health industry as well. Doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists.
Thank you, Dai. Dai, it was a pleasure to have you. And yeah, check the links below, everyone. And remember to breathe.
That's great. And don't forget to breathe. Breath is life. And breath is freedom.
There's so many golden nuggets. Thank you all. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this interview. And please subscribe my YouTube channel. For you, it's a one click. For me, it means the possibility to continue creating impact in the world with those videos. Thank you, and see you soon.